Now, 30 years ago, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in return for security assurances that were given by Moscow, Washington and London when it relinquished its nuclear arsenal to Russia in 1994. Now, the war-torn country wants ironclad protection from its allies as the NATO leaders meet in the Lithuanian capital Vilnius. More than 500 days since the war broke out in Ukraine, Kiev has pressed to become a part of the military alliance. Zelensky says Ukraine joining NATO will make the alliance stronger. Ukraine sees it as a big boost for them to deter the Russian aggression. The West has maintained its as long as it takes approach. It has not shied away once from showing its support. But on paper, NATO has been divided over Ukraine's membership. Ukraine's largest Western allies are still finalizing a joint framework that will pave the way for long-term security assurances for Kiev. The United States and Germany are wary of any move that might take the alliance closer to war with Russia. The big hurdle for Ukraine to become a part of the alliance is the ongoing war. Ukraine knows it will not get entry into the alliance while the war with Russia continues, given that NATO's Article 5, which states that an attack on one member is an attack on all, could push the alliance into war with Russia. In the meantime, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Vilnius summit must confirm Ukraine a de facto member of NATO, as a majority of NATO members have stood together with his country. Zelensky further said weapon supplies for Ukraine in its war against Russia would also be discussed at the summit. Although NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said NATO will extend an invitation to Ukraine to join the military alliance when members agree and conditions are met, like they did for Finland and Sweden, who were invited to join the alliance directly by passing the membership action plan. While Finland became a NATO member recently, Sweden is also set to be given membership after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with Swedish Prime Minister and NATO Secretary General for special talks on Sweden's membership, following which Stoltenberg announced that Turkey has agreed to move ahead with Sweden's NATO bid. Although for Ukraine to become a part of the alliance might seem like a long road ahead, the Biden administration is reportedly considering proposing an Israel model for Ukraine in NATO. It is a security model that Western leaders, including the US president, have compared with what Israel has now, a deal that would be a limited commitment and not include a collective defense guarantee. Now, according to reports, the White House would pledge to continue providing more military aid to Ukraine regardless of the outcome of the ongoing counteroffensive. The deal would likely be for a shorter period than the commitment to Israel, which typically runs in 10-year intervals. Moreover, on the sidelines of the summit, an announcement is expected to come from Ukraine's key allies. Now, according to reports, the declaration from most of the G7 leaders will be on an agreement to launch negotiations with Kiev on a collection of bilateral security commitments. These will be aimed at bolstering Ukraine's ability to defend itself and deter future Russian aggression.
Свобода, якої для України хотіли всі наші герої різних часів та яку належить вибороти саме зараз, буде шаною усім, хто віддав життя.
And for more on this, we're now being joined by Joachim Bitterlich, who is the former German ambassador to NATO and former European diplomatic and security advisor to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. He's joining us live from Normandy. Joachim, thank you very much for joining us at this hour and welcome to the program. I'll begin by asking you what the Ukraine president really asserted during his speech at the NATO summit. He says that today I start my journey with strong faith in NATO. If NATO does not, if NATO does not hesitate, that does not waste time. I would like to say that we deserve respect, every soldier, every mother. And he's asking, is that too much to ask? Given this speech by Volodymyr Zelensky in the NATO summit, and given what the members of the NATO summit are saying, that it's not yet time to give Ukraine the membership of the NATO, what do you make of these statements and of this development so far?
Well, it's clear for the moment there is a certain frustration or even a certain deception you can read in the words of Volodymyr Zelensky. And we have to understand him to some extent, because he is in a war. He is fighting against an invasion from Russia, which has in reality, you've mentioned this before about the past of this war, that the Russians have in reality never really recognized the total independence of Ukraine. It was a certain agreement to disagree. They took away the nuclear weapons, fine, in agreement with the West, but in reality, the Russians have never really recognized the independence. And now it's clear that Zelensky has been expecting a clear word on the Ukraine in NATO. And therefore, the common declaration of the NATO member states is declaring, yes, the future of Ukraine is in NATO, but the formal invitation, this includes then, once ratified, the famous Article 5, the protection of Ukraine, is only once the conditions will be fulfilled. And this is not yet. And this means that this can enter into force only once peace, or at least a ceasefire is existing at the end of this war foreseeable. And therefore it's normal. It's still a long road ahead of the Ukraine. And therefore certain people in NATO have been reflecting about, let's say, about alternatives, about a minor protection, delivering arms, equipment, training forces. Yes, no doubt. But people have been reflecting in the US about, let's say, the Israeli model, which is a certain security guarantee, not a full one, but a certain. There are other reflections about certain programs, but with the risk of provoking a gray zone. And therefore, what especially the Americans and the Germans want to avoid is, let's say, to enter into a war between NATO and Russia.
Joachim, let me ask you this. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that if Ukraine is enjoined into NATO, it will make the alliance stronger. Do you believe that actually if Finland, Sweden and Ukraine are made part of the alliance, they will make it stronger? And how are they going to do that? Because there's so much denial from some of the member states, member countries or members of the alliance, that they say that the inclusion of these three countries doesn't change a lot or doesn't change anything.
No, please, let's be frank towards old friends in India. Finland and Sweden will reinforce NATO. For me, it's clear. It closes the northern flank of NATO, which has always been a certain weak one. It has been Norway and Denmark. Now it's with Sweden and Finland. In my eyes, excellent views. And this will protect more the Baltic countries. It will protect more even the north of Germany, the north of Poland. Yes, it's okay. Ukraine, in my personal eyes, and there I speak really on my own, is a certain risk. We have always been aware that, let's say, the change of the status of Ukraine would be, let's say, crossing the red lines for the Russians in Moscow. Because we have always been considering the Ukraine in another way than we have seen it. Yes, Ukraine has been independent officially since 91. But for the Russians, well, independent or not, has never been really clear. We have told about, but the Russians have been, let's say, always considering the Ukraine as a special case, as they've been considering Georgia or Armenia or all the former states of the Soviet Union as special cases. We have given away the Baltic countries. For me, it's over, it's clear, it's accepted. Poland, the Russians have abandoned, it's clear too. The Russians have never been saying any word about Bulgaria or Romania, but the Ukraine has for the Russians, when you look at history, when you look at geography, it's a special area.
All right.
And what we have been missing, we from the West, and perhaps even you from the Indian side, as let's say a positive, neutral world influencer,
All right,
is
Joachim.
to carry that status.
All right, Joachim, we have to leave that discussion there. I've been talking to the former German ambassador to NATO and former European diplomatic and security advisor to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Joachim, thank you very much for talking to WION World is One today.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Good evening to Delhi.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.